The following podcast is based on publicly available documents and reporting. All facts presented are drawn from verified sources. Certain scenes are dramatized or reconstructed for clarity and storytelling purposes. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Listener discretion is advised. December 27th, 2011. 2 days after Christmas. Troy, Missouri. A town so small you could drive through it in the time it takes your coffee to cool. Folks there knew each other's dogs by name, and if you missed church on Sunday, your phone would ring by Monday morning. But on that winter night, the cold carried something heavier than frost. At 9:40 p.m., Russ Faria dialed the phone. Russ thought his wife, Betsy, had ended her own life. But the truth was uglier than anything he could have imagined. When the paramedics walked inside, they didn't find grief. They found rage carved into flesh. Betsy Faria hadn't slipped away quietly. She had been stabbed 55 times. That night didn't just take a woman's life. It cracked a town in two. It sent an innocent man to prison, and it laid bare the kind of evil that hides in plain sight. Because sometimes, the real danger doesn't knock at your door. It smiles as it steps inside. This is a story of Pam Hupp. I'm Dan Cooley, and this is The Widowmaker. Before the blood, before the betrayal, you need to know Betsy. In 2011, she was 42. 2 daughters still lived under her roof. The kind of mom who clapped loudest at school plays. The kind of friend who remembered your birthday even when you'd forgotten it yourself. Her laughter carried across rooms, bright and unfiltered, louder even than the humming chemo pumps that kept her lashed to a chair, drip by drip, as her body fought a war she didn't choose. The disease drained her frame, but it never managed to wring out her light.
She loved her girls more than anything. Betsy had such a big heart. Everybody really loved her.
But behind that laughter, her body was burning itself away. Breast cancer. The first diagnosis came in 2010. Chemo took her strength, her hair, her weight, but not her defiance. Then it came back. Uglier this time. The doctors spoke with less hope. Betsy smiled anyway. She had to. At home, Russ tried to stand guard against the tide. He drove her to treatments, warmed leftovers when she couldn't climb from bed, fought with the insurance company like it was his own personal devil. Their marriage wasn't spotless. They fought, sometimes loud, sometimes sharp. But when the cancer came roaring back, he was there in the hard chair, holding her hand, watching the woman he loved suffer and trying to pretend he was strong enough for both of them. And then there was Pam. Russ Faria left his friend's house just after 9 on December 27, 2011. Tuesday night ritual. Board games, cigarettes on the porch, jokes that only make sense in the haze of habit. A comfort, like putting on a worn flannel shirt. On the way home, he swung into an Arby's. A sandwich bag rustled on the seat beside him as headlights carved tunnels through the dark. The road back to Troy was a long ribbon of nothing. Frozen fields, bare trees standing guard, the radio whispering country songs into the lonely night. By 9:40, Russ was home. He stepped inside, calling for Betsy.
Betsy, I'm home. Betsy?
What he found stopped him cold.
Oh my God!
Betsy lay on the couch.
My God, no!
The air smelled of iron. Blood soaked her clothes, spread into the carpet like the house itself was bleeding. A kitchen knife jutted from her throat, its handle catching the dim light like a flag planted in conquered ground. Russ Faria began by sobbing.
What is the address where you need this to come?
130 C-Mac.
Former 911 operator Tammy Vaughn picked up the call.
I killed herself. She's on the floor.
She knew instantly this would be a tough call, maybe her toughest.
I could hardly take the call because I looked over at my supervisor and I did one of those, I don't know if I can do this.
Okay, just take a couple deep breaths for me.
Tammy Vaughn did what she's trained to do, get Faria to answer questions about his dead wife, Betsy. The call lasted 10 minutes.
Russell, how long were you gone today?
I was around 5. I just got back. But she was at her mom's and her friend was bringing her home, so I don't know what time she got home.
911 supervisor testified that Russ's call sounded strange, swinging in and out of hysteria. The defense objected, but the judge let it in. The jury heard it. What they didn't hear, the dispatcher who actually took the call, Tammy Vaughn. She later said she never found it odd at all.
You can't fake that. You can't fake that emotion. In my personal opinion, you can't. Are there people out there that can do it? I don't know, because all the calls that I've taken have been true hysterical callers.
Tammy Vaughn, the dispatcher who actually took Russ's call, said nothing about it was unusual. In fact, she explained, 911 operators are trained to calm down hysterical callers and get them to answer questions. That's the job.
It's a redirection. It's a technique that communicators use to try to redirect, calm them down, ask them the question, and then whenever they have to focus back on the victim or the patient or the person that's needing the help, then they do what's called a refreak.
In 911 dispatching, a refreak, sometimes called refreaking, is slang used by some call takers for when a caller who had calmed down suddenly becomes hysterical again. That happened repeatedly on the Faria call.
Has she been depressed lately?
She's got cancer.
I need you to get those medications for the paramedics, okay?
I think they're here on the table.
Tammy Vaughn learned something the following week that was an unexpected twist.
I later on learned that I knew them. At the time that I took the call, I had no idea who it was. And then later on, I realized that, it was, a couple that I went to church with.
She remembers Russ's words etched in her mind.
What am I gonna do?
What am I gonna do? In that moment, she thought she might break, but she stayed with him on the line, steady until police arrived.
What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do?
Russ thought she had taken her own life. But when investigators arrived, they saw a different story written in red. Betsy hadn't slipped away. She had been carved apart 55 times. Chest, arms, throat. The wounds overlapped, as if somebody had been trying to erase her from existence with the edge of a blade. The walls carried freckles of blood. The carpet swallowed pools of it, thick and dark, as if the house itself had grown a second shadow. First responders whispered later that it was one of the worst scenes they'd ever seen. And then there was Russ, shaking, his hands, his clothes streaked with blood, sobbing words that broke apart in his throat.
The defendant was crying and saying, she's gone, she's gone. He was very emotional, but given the amount of blood, we treated him as a suspect.
Russ swore he had just walked in. He swore his 4 friends could vouch for his night. But the house couldn't tell them that. The house only offered silence, the stink of blood, and Betsy's body cooling on the couch. By midnight, Russell Faria was in handcuffs. What police missed that night was simple. Betsy's last ride home wasn't with Russ. It was with Pam. Pam Hupp. Pam Hupp slid into the picture like a shadow that didn't belong to any light. She was suddenly everywhere. In waiting rooms, in grocery aisles, in the passenger seat of Betsy's car. Always with something in her hands. A bag, a clipboard, a smile that stretched just a little too wide. To the casual eye, it looked saintly. The perfect friend.
She was always there. I mean, always. If Betsy needed something, Pam was there before anyone else.
But Pam wasn't orbiting out of kindness. She was circling, closing in. On December 23rd, just 4 days before Betsy's body would bleed itself empty, a pen scratched across paper. The beneficiary of her $150,000 life insurance shifted. Russ's name vanished under ink. Pam's appeared in its place. Pam told the police it was all for the girls, that a trust would be set up. But no trust ever came. The money stayed with her. And on December 27th, Betsy Faria's final ride home wasn't with her husband. It was with Pam Hupp. Hours after finding his wife's body, Russ Faria wasn't home grieving. He was in handcuffs inside the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office, under lights that made even the innocent look guilty. To Russ, that 911 call was panic, the sound of a man drowning. To investigators, it was the first act of a confession. And outside those walls, someone else was already whispering. Russ sat under buzzing bulbs, telling his story until the words lost their shape. Game night from 6 until after 9. An Arby's stop, a sandwich eaten alone in his car. Then home. To the couch. To the blood.
I came home and she was on the couch. There was blood everywhere. I tried to wake her up. I don't know what else to tell you. I didn't do this. I did not do this.
Phone records lined up. 4 friends swore he'd been with them. But in the sheriff's office, certainty didn't matter. Because while Russ sat under fluorescent glare, Pam Hupp was already in another room, shaping a story. A friend who smiled too easily. A caretaker who lingered too long. She wasn't on trial. She was writing it. By sunrise, Russ Faria was charged with first-degree murder. 2 years later, November 2013, the trial. The evidence was thin to the point of breaking. No DNA, no prints, no weapon tied to Russ. But the prosecution had something sharper than proof. They had a story. And that story had a mouthpiece. Pam Hupp.
Betsy told me she was scared of Russ, you know. She said he had a temper. I worried for her, you know.
Pam told jurors she dropped Betsy off that night. Claimed Betsy whispered her fears about Russ's anger. She painted him as volatile, the kind of man who might crack wide open when no one was looking. No blood splatter on his clothes to match the frenzy. No cuts on his hands despite 55 stab wounds. But prosecutors didn't need wounds or prints. Pam had given them motive. She had given them a marriage breaking at the seams.
Ladies and gentlemen, Russell Faria had the motive. He had the means, and he had the opportunity. Betsy wanted to leave him, and he killed her for it.
Russ's defense fought back. 4 witnesses, phone records, proof that Betsy's life insurance had been signed over to Pam Hupp, not Russ. But the jury didn't see Pam's smile in that paperwork. They only saw Russ sitting at the table.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Russell Faria, guilty of murder in the first degree.
Russ Faria was sentenced to life in prison. And as the chains tightened around his wrist, the real killer wasn't in shackles. She was outside the courtroom, smiling. Russ Faria sat in a prison cell, branded a wife killer. To Missouri, the book was closed. The villain had been cast, the curtain dropped. But to defense attorney Joel Schwartz, it wasn't justice. It was theater. And the wrong man was wearing the mask. Joel pried into the case and found holes wide enough to drive daylight through. 4 friends swore Russ never left the game night. His phone pinged miles away from the crime scene. An Arby's receipt time-stamped his dinner. And then, the blood. Betsy had been stabbed 55 times. 55. Yet the slippers police said Russ wore that night carried only a few lonely drops of blood. Forensic experts shook their heads. It was impossible. Like walking through a storm and coming home bone dry.
Everything pointed to him being innocent. The jury just didn't hear the whole story.
And in the shadow of this story was Pam. Her tale bent and cracked with every retelling. First, she left Betsy's at 7, then 7:30. Eventually, she admitted she'd been holding back all along. She was the last to see Betsy alive. Yet the cuffs never found her wrists.
Well, yeah, I was with her, but I don't know. It was dark. I can't remember exactly when I left.
Joel Schwartz argued Russ's conviction wasn't built on evidence. It was built on Pam's words, and the state's hunger to close the file. 4 years after his arrest, the cracks finally split wide. Russ was granted a new trial. This time, Joel came heavily prepared. Pam's shifting timelines, the insurance money she kept, the absence of Russ's DNA anywhere near Betsy's body, or the knife that had done the work.
Ladies and gentlemen, the state ignored the evidence. They ignored the alibi. And they ignored the truth. Russ Faria is innocent.
The judge didn't hesitate.
The court hereby finds the defendant not guilty. Russell Faria is acquitted of all charges.
After nearly 4 years behind bars, Russ walked free.
I knew I didn't do it. I knew the truth would eventually come out.
But the truth was larger than Russ's freedom, because Betsy's real killer wasn't behind bars. She was still out there, quiet, patient, smiling. Her name was Pam Hupp. By 2016, Russ Faria was free. His conviction overturned, his name dragged out of the mud. But Betsy's murder, still unsolved. And Pam Hupp, she still lingered at the edges like she always did, smiling for cameras, waving at neighbors, playing the part of the cheerful helper. Until one day, the mask she wore slipped, not with a whisper, with a gunshot. August 16th, 2016, O'Fallon, Missouri. Pam reinvented herself again, this time as a TV producer. She said she was working on the show about the Fiera case. She promised cash, $1,000, to strangers who would reenact a 911 call. Most said no. One man didn't. Louis Gumpenberger. Louis was 33, a father. In 2005, he'd survived a wreck so violent it changed the shape of his life. Brain damage slowed his thoughts. A limp dragged his walk. He lived on disability. Vulnerable in ways you could see, in ways you couldn't. And Pam noticed. That afternoon, Louis followed Pam into her neat little home. Moments later, neighbors heard the sound. Pam called 911.
911, where's your emergency?
Hey, hello, there's someone broken in my house. Help!
Police and prosecutors say Pam Hupp staged the entire 911 call after handing Louis Gumpenberger $900 in cash and luring him into her home with a lie about helping on a news segment.
911, where's your emergency?
Hupp called not once but twice, then hung up.
Hello, 911.
Dispatchers noticed something strange. The third time Hupp called, they heard nothing in the background. St. Charles prosecutor Tim Lomar pointed out they were already listening before she spoke, and the line was dead silent.
The 2 or 3 seconds before the dispatch officer answered, it was dead silence. So there was nothing going on the other side of that phone from the caller, which would be highly unusual if you're involved in a situation she described.
Louis Gumpenberger lay dead on her floor.
He came at me. He tried to kidnap me. I had to shoot him. I had to.
Pam told police he was a hired hitman sent by Russ Faria to kidnap and kill her. And she had proof. A note stuffed in Louis's pocket. Kidnap Pam. Get Russ's money. But the story cracked before the ink could dry. The cash in Louis's pocket traced straight back to Pam's ATM withdrawals. The note? Crooked letters, like a child's forgery. And Pam's phone records? They put her right in Louis's neighborhood that morning, circling like a hunter before the kill.
The whole thing was a ruse. It was a staged event. And it was very clear from the beginning.
Witnesses stepped forward. They said Pam had approached them too, waving cash, asking them to reenact a 911 scene. They walked away. Louis hadn't. It was theater. A trap. Another play meant to hang Russ Faria all over again. But this time, the curtain came down hard. Pam Hupp had murdered an innocent man. And for the first time, the shadow she casts was no longer quiet. Investigators are closing in. By 2016, the evidence against Pam Hupp was no longer smoke and whispers. It was bricks, falling, crashing, piling into something inescapable. The staged kidnapping, the ransom note, scrawled like a bad stage prop. Cash, traced straight from her own account. Witnesses remembered her odd smiles, her offers of easy money for a reenactment, and then Louis Gumpenberger, dead on her floor. A man too broken by life to defend himself. This time, there was no one else to point the finger at. Pam Hupp was arrested, charged with first-degree murder. The state's prosecutors sharpened their knives, ready to bleed her story dry in front of a jury.
Police brought Pam Hupp into headquarters. Her story? Self-defense. An officer guided her into the interview room. They couldn't immediately reach her attorney.
See if we can get all of them.
So they read her rights. She was asked to initial that she understood. Then the officers stepped out again, leaving Pam alone with a water bottle, a pen, and her own lies. Pam touches her neck, slow, deliberate, like she's feeling her own pulse. She knows the camera is on her, so every move is careful. The lens catches her sliding a water bottle, then a pen, using one to cover the other. Her hand turns palm down, casual, as she slips the pen behind her and tucks it into her waistband. After the interview, deputies escorted Pam Hupp to the bathroom.
There's an elevator here. Someone else here that's going to escort you to the bathroom, okay?
Moments later, chaos. She had taken the hidden pen and driven it into her own neck and wrists again and again. A frantic, violent attempt at self-harm. Investigators later described the scene as almost impossible to count. The images are disturbing. It made one thing clear. Pam Hupp knew the walls were closing in, and she may have been trying to end it all that day. Prosecutors claim this event showed consciousness of guilt and helped secure a conviction.
But Pam had one card left. In 2019, facing the needle, she folded, slid into an Alford plea, that strange corner of the law.
An Alford plea is when a defendant pleads guilty while maintaining innocence, admitting the prosecution has enough evidence to convict, but choosing the plea to avoid the risk of a harsher sentence at trial.
Not an admission of guilt, an admission that the evidence would bury her alive.
The defendant is hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
Pam Hupp was locked away. A prison number. A cell door. A reputation sealed in blood. But Betsy's story hadn't ended. Not yet. In 2021, nearly a decade after Betsy's body was found on that couch, Lincoln County prosecutor Mike Wood stood before microphones and finally said the words Russ Faria had waited years to hear.
We believe Pam Hupp is the only person responsible for the murder of Betsy Faria.
Pam Hupp was officially charged with Betsy's murder. For Russ, it was vindication. For Betsy's daughters, it was a chance, late but real, at justice. And for Pam Hupp, it was the beginning of her final chapter. Russ Faria lost his wife. Then the system stole nearly 4 years of his life. Louis Gumpenberger, a father, a survivor, a man trying to put the pieces back together, lost everything on the floor of a stranger's home. And Betsy's daughters, they lost the most of all, their mother. All of it because of one woman who hid behind a smile.
I want justice for Betsy. That's what I've wanted all along.
Pam Hupp's web collapsed under its own weight. Today she sits in a cell, life without parole for the murder of Louis Gumpenberger, and awaiting trial for the murder of Betsy Faria. But her story is more than ink on paper, more than a headline. it's a warning. Because evil doesn't always kick the door in at midnight. Sometimes it shows up with groceries. Sometimes it rides in the passenger seat. Sometimes it calls itself a friend. Pam Hupp was the friend who became the executioner. She was the Widowmaker. Because the truth about murder is this: it doesn't end with the gavel, or the cell door, or even the grave. It keeps breathing in the people left behind, in the questions that never stop burning. I'm Dan Cooley. Stay safe out there, because someone's next case is already being written. This has been File 187, written and produced by Joe McReynolds. Narration by Dan Cooley. We'll be back. New stories, same purpose. Truth is louder when we listen. I'm Dan Cooley. Stay alert. Stay safe.